Hello and welcome to Strategic Compass. We are today joined by eminent Professor Alfred de Zayas, a well-known professor and former ancien rapporteur de l'ONU. He's well known in international law and international politics. He's a regular commentator on internet and all the other sources, quite critical of the Western attitude in general in their dealing with Russia, in particularly Israel's aggression on the neighboring countries and all that. Professor de Zayas, welcome to our program and thank you
for inviting me. Yes.
Well, I know you are jet lagged. We are going to do the interview as short as we can, but the subjects we are going to be talking are quite productive in various sense. Now, first, as we talk, basically on Friday in the early morning hours, there has been the Israeli aggressions all over. It started on the 13th of June with the Israeli aggression on Iran, and now Israel seems to be messing up with Syria in a big way. What are your comments and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, both Israel and the United States are at war with international law. They are at war with the UN Charter. They thoroughly ignore the United Nations pronouncements, whether it be from the International Court of Justice, and there are the two advisory opinions of 4 July 2004, 19 July 2024. You have the pending case South Africa against Israel. You have the pending advisory opinion on UNRWA and Israel's sabotage of UN agencies, etc. There's no doubt that Israel has breached a whole series of international treaties, including, of course, the United Nations Charter. So what to make out of that? Well, we are all complicit in the so-called collective West. The United States, Canada, United Kingdom, France, Germany, Brussels, basically, the European Union and NATO are at war with international law. They are destroying the great achievements of civilization represented in the United Nations Charter, represented in the whole body of human rights treaties. I mean, we have not only the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, but we have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the International Convention Against Racism, the Convention Against Apartheid, the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Israel and the United States have violated them all. And the problem is a culture of impunity because of the veto power in the Security Council. No matter what the International Court of Justice says, the Security Council is not going to sanction Israel or the United States. There'll be a veto. And not only from the United States, the United Kingdom and France would also put in a veto. So what we're seeing here is the dismantling of the rule of law, of the international rule of law. During my 6 years as rapporteur, I delivered 14 reports to the Human Rights Council and to the General Assembly. And in this book, I formulated 25 principles of international order that, if observed obviously we would have a different situation today. But the United States and Europe basically used, instrumentalized, manipulated the United Nations for more than 70 years. But of course, the world doesn't stay where it was in 1945. You have the global majority made up of Latin America, Africa, and Asia, and they do not want to be lackeys of Europe or colonized peoples of Europe and the United States. So countries like India, countries like China, they have their own legitimate interests, and they represent far more than half of humanity. So we have to listen to them. The United States lives in a bubble. The Europeans live in a bubble, and they don't want to realize that the world has changed. We do not have a unipolar world anymore, and it's only going to function through multilateralism and through diplomacy, or we're just going to blow ourselves up. Now, take an ongoing genocide. You have the doctrine of the responsibility to protect. If the responsibility to protect meant anything at all, it would have had to be applied against Israel decades ago, not just now, decades ago. Now, we have a rather sad history behind us. I'm an American citizen. I'm also a Swiss citizen. But as an American citizen, I'm aware of the crimes committed by my government, and I can shout not in my name, but no matter what I shout or what Jeffrey Sachs and Dan Kovalik and Stephen Kinzer and Francis Boyle and John Mersheimer shout, not in our name, they still do it. We're not a democracy. They don't listen to us. And unfortunately, Jeffrey Sachs is not the foreign minister of the United States. And our president, Donald Trump, doesn't give a hoot about international law. But this book, Martin Luther King Jr., written 1964, turn to page 161, has a whole section that begins with these words: our country was born in genocide. And he's not talking about slavery. He's not talking about the Africans, the Afro-Americans. He's talking about the autochthonous population of the United States, the natives, the Algonquians, the Crees, the Cherokees, the Iroquois, the Mohawks, the Dakotas and Lakotas and the Hopis and the Squamish. 10 million when the whites arrived. End of the 19th century, 200,000 left. We successfully exterminated 10 million human beings, destroyed their culture. So when Martin Luther King says our country was born in genocide, he knows what he's talking about. And I would go now the parallel. Israel was born not only with the genocide of the Palestinians, which actually is ongoing since the Nakba, but Israel was born in terrorism. People seem to forget that the Zionist groups in 1945, 46, 47, 48, 49 terrorized the Palestinian population, evicted it from their homes, destroyed their olive groves, destroyed their houses, bulldozed them out, expelled them. And ethnic cleansing has been declared to be a form of genocide by the General Assembly. So if the ethnic cleansing in Yugoslavia is a form of genocide, the ethnic cleansing in Israel is far more so. But going back to my statement, Israel is and was born in terrorism. Let's not forget, the United Nations has an enormous responsibility for creating this monster, for creating this state. And when Focke Bernadotte, the special envoy of the United Nations to Palestine, was sent in 1948 to try to persuade the Israelis to allow the emergence of a Palestinian state and to accept the frontiers that the General Assembly had rather generously given Israel, he was murdered. He was assassinated by Zionist extremists. Now, that is something that we do not perceive. We are in the West, and I presume also in Turkey. We are victims of relentless propaganda. We are victims of official brainwashing carried by the mainstream media. New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, BBC, Le Monde, Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung, Die Zeit, even here in Switzerland. The Neue Zürcher Zeitung is a very politicized newspaper, and they disseminate fake news, fake history, and fake law, because a great problem is the invention of law by politicians as they go along. And this brings me to the non-existent international law concept of preventive self-defense. 2003, when the United States decided they wanted regime change in Iraq, and they devastated the country, killed 1 million people, it was argued that that was preventive self-defense because Saddam Hussein supposedly had weapons of mass destruction. So there's no such thing as preventive self-defense. The only right of self-defense is Article 51 of the UN Charter, and it's very clear. You can only defend yourself, and only temporarily, if you have been victim of a military attack by another country. Since Iran or Iraq had not attacked anybody, well, obviously, there's no argument of self-defense on the part of the United States and the coalition of the willing. Ditto today with regard to Israel. When Israel attacks Iran, it's pure aggression. It is aggression in the sense of General Assembly Resolution 3314, in the sense of General Assembly Resolution 2625, in the sense of the Kampala definition of aggression for the International Criminal Court, in the sense of Article 5 of the Statute of Rome. So we have here blatant, brazen aggression against Iran, and the world has swallowed it, accepted it. The United Nations has been made irrelevant. Obviously, Antonio Guterres, our Secretary General, criticizes Israel and the United States for the breach of the peace. But since the United States would veto any sanctioning of Israel or sanctioning of itself, there's no mechanism to enforce the decisions of the International Court of Justice, which in its advisory opinion of 19 July 2024 very clearly said the occupation of Palestine by Israel is an illegal occupation. And not only must Israel withdraw from all occupied territories, by the way, as required under Security Council Resolution 242, way back in 1967. So for all these 60 years, Israel has flouted even the Security Council because, okay, you have a violation of international law. violation of the UN Charter, but there's no enforcement because the United States blocks the enforcement. Not to forget, the United States had used the veto power to protect Israel some 80 times. I'm not talking about just an occasional veto. As the case may be, Israel is the aggressor, but we don't perceive it as such because Friedrich Merz of Germany and Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer talk about Israel's right
to defend.
I mean, defend from what? I mean, Israel is the aggressor. And when we're talking about the Hamas attack on the surroundings of Gaza on the 7th of October 2023, you read General Assembly Resolution 3314, Article 7, the definition of aggression. That does not qualify as aggression. As a matter of fact, the Palestinians, within the meaning of Article 7 of Resolution 3314, have a right to resist the illegal occupation, have a right to fight the occupier, have a right to revolt against the occupier. This is quite similar, actually, to the situation of the Warsaw Ghetto in 1943. All the Jews had been packed into the Warsaw Ghetto. They were sieged by the Nazis. They rebelled, and then they were exterminated. But who had the right to resist the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto? Not the Nazis. The Nazis would have been totally ridiculous if the Nazis had said, "Oh, we have a right of self-defense against the Jews, whom we have brought into the Warsaw Ghetto, and whom we are in the process of starving to death." So again, perception is important. And if the New York Times and the Washington Post and the CNN tell us again and again that we are the good guys and the Iranians are the bad guys and the Palestinians are the bad guys, the Palestinians are terrorists. So with this kind of cognitive dissonance that we have, there cannot be any sustainable peace because it flies in the face of reality. I mean, what we are arguing, what Brussels is arguing, what Ursula von der Leyen is arguing, what Kaja Kallas is arguing is rubbish, has no content, no value in international law. But since, as I said, there is pseudo law, there is fake law, the politicians, just by mere repetition, convince the masses that they are right and that the Palestinians are wrong. So what we see here is a frontal attack on the United Nations, on the United Nations Charter, and beyond that, it's a frontal attack on civilization. What we're trying to do is to reestablish the primacy of power. Might is right. As President Nixon said 50 years ago, and as Trump is practicing today, what he does is the law. L'État, c'est moi. It's the same thing as Louis XIV. And that basically destroys any concept of law, any concept of equity, any concept of what the Germans call Rechtssicherheit. And this situation is a dire situation. The only hope that I see is in the global South, in the global majority, that the Africans and Asians should get together and say enough is enough. And just now in April, we had the 70th anniversary of the Bandung Declaration. You remember Bandung Declaration,
Yes.
1955? introduced by the then president of Indonesia, Sukarno. And there have been every 10 years or so, there have been additions, there have been celebrations of the Bandung Declaration. I think Bandung Declaration is like the United Nations Charter, a very good base for world peace, as indeed like 25 principles of international order. But that brings me to another book of mine. Why are we not making progress? And here in the human rights industry, I attempt an explanation. We have been hijacked. The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights has been hijacked. We have been basically for decades in the service of the West. And the Secretariat, I would say 80% of the Secretariat of the United Nations are ideologues pro-West. So even if you hire someone from Mauritius, or you hire someone from Uganda, or you hire someone from the Philippines, that person is most likely educated in Oxford, Cambridge, London School of Economics, Harvard, Yale, Columbia. So they've been impregnated with capitalism. So that what is the American or the European definition of democracy? It is not the correlation of what the people need and what the people want and the laws that govern them. No. Democracy means, for Ursula von der Leyen, capitalism. Or to use a term coined by Naomi Klein, you remember her famous book, The Shock Doctrine, published in 1907, disaster democracy, disaster capitalism. The idea is just very hard ball playing, very authoritarian, very totalitarian way of ruling the world. And it is, of course, risking World War III because China is not putting up with it. Neither is Russia. And Russia has been very restrained. Putin has been very sedate.
Shall I just intervene for a second, Professor Zayas? Well, I think this is a very important point. So I'll get off a little from the legal side of the matter. I mean, you wonderfully explained the whole picture to us, and into what you have actually touched upon. That is the geopolitical power play. So the West is actually destroying the very basis upon which they have based their power politics. The so-called rules-based order doesn't exist anymore, does it?
Well, no, the rules-based order is the United Nations Charter, and that exists. The concept of a rules-based order is Anthony Blinken's idea of how to circumvent the prohibition of the use of force, how to circumvent the United Nations treaties and still do what you want to do. To wit, what does the United States want to do? It wants to impose its system on the rest of the world. The United States wants to exploit the rest of the world, wants to profit from the rest of the world, wants to be financed from the rest of the world. One thinks of the Golden Horde and the tribute that had to be paid to the Golden Horde by the Russians and by all the peoples who had been occupied by the Golden Horde in the Middle Ages. And this kind of mentality, it's much worse than feudal mentality. This is totalitarianism worldwide, universal. And that is what the United States has gotten away with hitherto, partly because of this relentless propaganda, partly because of the public relations that sells us Israel as the only democracy in the Middle East. We spend billions of dollars in propaganda to portray Israel as a legal entity, and we keep arguing Israel has the right to exist. Sure, I'm not disputing Israel exists, but the Palestinians don't have a state. The Palestinians also have a right to exist on their land without being expelled, without having the obscenity of what Donald Trump called a Gaza Riviera, which of course would be a Gaza Riviera without Palestinians, with a Gaza Riviera for the Israelis and the Americans and the oligarchs of the world. So we have here, and it's a very serious situation, a frontal attack on the foundations of international law, not only on treaties, but on the very foundations of it. And who has explained that rather well? John Mearsheimer, in his famous book, The Great Delusion. Who has also explained that is Jeffrey Sachs, who's written 24 books, who also explains that in the context of Israel, Ilan Pappé. Ilan Pappé, the Israeli historian at the University of Essex in London, Norman Finkelstein in New York, and Jeffrey Sachs, he's also Jewish. I mean, so there's a Jewish voice for peace. There's a Jewish voice for rationality. So let's not amalgamate. Let's not make the mistake of saying Israel and the Israelis are bad. No. The Israeli population, the vast majority of them, are brainwashed. The Israeli population, like the American population, is brainwashed by relentless propaganda. And thank God there are Jews in Israel, but there are also Jews outside in the diaspora. Take Professor Avi Schlein in Cambridge. And of course, as I said, Ilan Pappé. These are born Israelis who are ashamed of what is being done in their name. It's the same situation of me 50 years ago when I demonstrated at Harvard University. I was a young student at Harvard, and I was demonstrating against the Vietnam War. And I was shouting, not in my name. I don't want these crimes in my name. I don't like massacring 500 Vietnamese because we think that we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. And I don't, if I were an Israeli, I would not want to have anything to do with the genocide against the Palestinians. But it goes on, and with the complicity, with the whitewashing, with the hypocrisy of Ursula von der Leyen and of Kaja Kallas and of Emmanuel Macron and this unmögliche Friedrich Merz. I mean, Germany doesn't seem to find any good, solid, rational leaders. They have one bad leader after another. Pity for a country that has such a wonderful history of philosophers like Immanuel Kant and Wilhelm Hegel and
also politicians like Otto von Bismarck, who were extremely good diplomats at the same time.
And balanced.
Yes,
Bismarck was a very sedate individual and moderate, restrained. He did not want to, like Georges Clemenceau in Paris. I think Georges Clemenceau is the father of the Second World War. His intransigence, his hatred of everything German was such that this monstrosity of the Treaty of Versailles occurred as the Treaty of Saint-Germain, the Treaty of Trianon, also the Treaty of Sèvres, which was signed by the representatives of Sultan Mehmed VI. But what did Kemal Ataturk do? Said, this is rubbish, this is garbage, I'm not going to put up with it. And he fought the Brits and he fought the French and kicked them out. So the Treaty of Sèvres never had the devastating effects that it was intended to have against Turkey, against the former Ottoman Empire. whereas the stupidities of the Treaty of Versailles and Saint-Germain led directly to the Second World War. So, as I said, you mentioned Bismarck, and I lived for 7 years in Germany. I took my doctorate in history. I had my doctorate in law from Harvard, but my doctorate in history is from Göttingen. By the way, Albert Einstein was at Göttingen. As the case may be, I love German culture. I love German philosophy. I love German music. And I just find it so abstruse that they should have leaders like Angela Merkel and like Friedrich Merz and this idiot, this mediocre, this amateur called Olaf Scholz. And the future president of the General Assembly, if that is not a scandal, a warmonger, really a fanatical, rabid warmonger, Annalena Baerbock, was appointed president of the General Assembly. That goes back to my book, The Human Rights Industry. What do you do when the institutions created to defend your rights actually betray you? I mean, with someone like Annalena Baerbock as president of the General Assembly, what can you expect from this body? It has no credibility at all. I mean, it has no authority at all if they appoint someone like that as president. It's sad for me because I devoted 50 years of my life to the United Nations and to human rights work. And I find it very troubling that we have this situation. And I may want to end our chat with the fundamental, if you want, constitutional question that the great Roman writer Juvenal wrote in his sixth satire. And for those who want to look for the sentence, these are verses 347 and 348 of the sixth satire. Quis custodiet ipsos custodes? Who will be guardian over the guardians? What do you do when the guardians actually are working against you and they're not protecting you? Mm-hmm. This is the crucial question that cuts right across the whole system. I mean, you have fake human rights operators in Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch and the International Federation of Human Rights, etc. They do some good stuff, huh? They do. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're not all corrupted, but they are partly corrupted, and they serve Washington. They serve Brussels. One person who's married to, I'm a fan of Richard Falk, Professor Richard Falk, who is married with Professor Hilal Elver, who is Turkish. And they spend half of the year in Turkey, half of the year in Santa Barbara, California. And Richard Falk has written a great deal. And he's one of the few heroes that I still have, because Richard Falk is rationality in person. Richard Falk's book, let me see whether I'm probably sitting on it, because I had to raise my my chair a bit, and it didn't want to raise. So here it is. I'm sitting on this book.
Found it. Good.
Richard Falk, Hans von Sponeck, Liberating the United Nations. It's a brilliant book and a playbook how to correct this mess that we're in. And I must say, we need more Richard Falks. We need more Hans von Sponecks. We need more Jeffrey Sachs. So let's try to.
I think we do also need more Alfred de Zayas.
Well, nobody listens to me anyhow. That's why
we do.
When you wanted to interview me, say, well, fine. I'm not against it. I'll give you an interview. And by the way, as I said, I'm badly jet lagged. I probably would be a lot better if you had caught me next week or the week after. Since today I have to now go out of the house, that's why I said I'm in a hurry. I have to go out of the house. I didn't have the time to put on a decent shirt and a decent bow tie. If you know all my pictures for the United Nations, I always have my bow ties. And I didn't get around to doing it. So you have me here in my office where I was working before the call. Yeah.
Well, no problem. And Professor de Zayas, thank you very much. It's always been very, very good to talk to you. And, we can always talk again, in the months ahead as the world troubles are basically, going on here or
Well,
there.
I want to end with a word on behalf of my colleague and admired colleague, the rapporteur on Palestine, Francesca Albanese.
Yes.
Francesca Albanese deserves, if anybody ever deserved the Nobel Peace Prize, she does. She has worked tirelessly for peace in the Middle East. She has worked tirelessly for the self-determination of the Palestinian people. I would want to see Francesca Albanese honored, and I would like to see her work recognized and her blueprint for peace in the Middle East implemented. And that's what is that. Implementation, enforcement. We have international law, we have norms, we have treaties. They're not being implemented. That's where the problem is. And that's where the credibility of the United Nations has suffered so much. We have no authority anymore. Nobody takes us seriously anymore. And why should they? I mean, if we cannot stop an ongoing genocide, what good are we? I mean, that is something for your listeners to think about. And maybe Erdogan can nominate Francesca Albanese for the Nobel Peace Prize. That would be a coup.
Sounds a very good idea, actually. She's been extremely courageous and very constructive in her reporting, as far as I follow her reporting on what is being going on since October 7th.
I suffered the indignity of receiving death threats while I was special rapporteur. Well, I've spoken with Francesca. She receives them regularly. I just received a couple. I think she's received dozens of death threats. And so you see, at least she's having more of an impact than I ever had. And I mean, I'm hoping that her reports will finally take traction thanks to the endorsement of the global majority, the endorsement of the global south, of Latin America, Africa, and Asia. That's where the hope for humanity lies. I mean, we Europeans, unfortunately, have failed. We have failed humanity. We have failed ourselves. We have failed our populations. And let me say one word to Turkey. You really have nothing to gain by joining the European Union. I think Turkey would be far better served within BRICS and participating in any number of other truly multilateral schemes.
I thoroughly agree. In a Financial Times article of mine back in 2004, when all this jubilation was going on about the European Union, and the title said Turkey would be better off outside the EU.
Totally agree. Totally agree. So,
excellent.
On this happy note, look forward to speaking to you again.
Well, I look forward to talking to you again online and perhaps meeting you somewhere in person. Professor de Zayas, thank you very much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, we have hosted Professor Alfred de Zayas, an eminent professor on international law, international human rights law, and an eminent expert on world geopolitics. Thank you very much, Professor de Zayas, again, and bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye for now. God bless. Thank you.